The webinar started and we're live to YouTube. Jordan, is there anybody else who needs to get in here that I can send a link?
I think that everyone should have a link now. I think that Kirsten resent them.
Okay, great.
I'll just wait a few minutes and let you know. Kendra, are we ready with eScribe?
We are.
Thanks.
I can't hear them.
All right, good afternoon. I think we'll go ahead and get started. We may have some people filtering in over the next few minutes. I will go ahead and call the Land Use and Planning Committee for September 16th to order. As you all know by now, this is a virtual meeting. There's instructions to join the meeting that are displayed on screen right now. You can go to missoulapublicmeetings.com if you're watching via YouTube or MCAT to get a link to join the live meeting. If you wish to make public comment during the meeting, please use the hand raise function in Zoom. And if you're joining by telephone, which no one is right now, you press *9 to indicate to me that you want to speak. You can also call and leave a voicemail at 406-552-6012. We have two regular agenda items today, and I guess we'll start with, before that, we'll start with roll call. Anderson is absent, Becerra is present, Contos is present, Harp is absent, Hess is present, Jones is present, Merritt is present, Ramos is present, Cheryl is present, Vasika is present, Von Lasberg is absent, and West is absent. We have 3 sets of minutes from August 26th, September 2nd, and September 9th to approve. Are there any objections to those minutes? Seeing none, those will be approved. And then, is there any public comment on items that are not listed on the agenda? Okay, seeing no general public comment, we can move on to our regular committee business. The first is a group living conditional use request from 365 to 375 Scott Street. And Caitlin McCafferty has our staff report.
Hello, can you all hear me and see my screen?
Yes, thanks.
Great. So I'm Caitlin McCafferty from Development Services. This is a request from Jules Landis of Intuitive Architecture on behalf of Jerry Dernberger of 1029 West Pine Partnership for a group living use at 375 Scott Street. The applicant is proposing 2 group living structures, each with 23 bedroom suites that have shared kitchen and gathering spaces. The total number of bedroom suites on this parcel is 46. This slide shows the location of the subject property outlined in blue. It is at 375 Scott Street at the corner of Scott and West. The project will contain 2 newly constructed buildings. The subject property is zoned C1-4 neighborhood commercial with a design excellence downtown overlay. And according to Title 20, a group living use requires conditional use approval to operate in the C1-4 zoning district. Despite the design excellence overlay, design excellence is not applicable for this project as the overlay only applies to multi-dwelling and commercial projects, not detached houses. Group living facilities are considered similar to detached houses because of that shared kitchen and living spaces. The Missoula 2035 City Growth Policy designates the subject property for urban center land use, shown here in red. Urban center is a land use that is intended to address the concentration of downtown uses, including commercial office, retail, arts and entertainment, eating and drinking establishments, and residential uses. To the north of the property in orange is designated as neighborhood mixed use, and to the south in green is parks and open lands. The slide shows the current conditions of the site viewed from Scott and West Pine Streets. The property slopes to the southwest from that corner of Scott and West Pine. This is a current schematic of the proposed projects. Again, there are 2 total buildings, both with 23 bedroom suites with shared kitchen and living spaces. The allowable density for a group living use is calculated per Title 20, which allows 2.7 residents per 1,000 square feet in parcel area in this zoning district, which is C1-4. The subject property is a bit above 17,000 square feet, allowing for 47 residents on this property. 46 bedroom suites are proposed, and 1 resident per bedroom suite would be permitted. In order to comply with Title 20 requirements on density, staff is recommending a condition of approval requiring that the applicant limit the density to 1 resident per bedroom suite and provide a copy of the lease agreement that includes this restriction prior to the building permit approval. Here's the site plan for the project. On the south are the parking spaces, and on the west are bike parking spaces. So this is bike, and this is vehicle parking spaces. And I'll explain those calculations on this slide. So Title 20 requires 2 parking spaces per group living building. This project has 2 buildings, thus requiring 4 total vehicle parking spaces. The applicant is proposing 10 parking spaces plus 1 additional ADA parking space. For bike parking, Title 20 does not list group living under the required standards, making the requirement 0 for bike parking, and the applicant has proposed 46 covered bicycle parking spaces along the west side of the parcel. So going back to this previous slide, it's right here is the bike, and here is the vehicle parking. Now I will address the proposed change in zoning and how the proposed conditional use, not change in zoning, is in accordance with the conditional use review criteria found in Title 20 as shown on this slide. So first we have compliance with zoning, which along with engineering and fire standards will be confirmed at the time of the building permit approval per conditions of approval number 1 and 2. Next, compatibility with the character of the area and surrounding buildings. Group living use in this location will not compromise either public convenience or the general welfare of the neighborhood or community. The project is similar in design and scale to the residential and multifamily uses to the north of the property, and condition of approval number 2 restricts the density to the amount that's allowed by zoning. Next, operating characteristics. The group living use has compatible operating characteristics similar to other residential uses in the surrounding area. And finally, traffic safety. The surrounding road infrastructure is adequate to handle the additional traffic that will be generated by the group living use. Scott Street is functionally classified as a major collector road, and the site is half a block north of West Broadway, which is classified as a principal arterial street. The site is served by transit, sidewalks, and bike lanes. So we have 2 proposed conditions of approval for this conditional use request. First is that the group living conditional use at 375 Scott Street shall comply with all applicable portions of Title 20. Plans submitted at the time of building permit application shall substantially conform with the plan submitted at the time of conditional use review, subject to review and approval of development services prior to building permit approval. And the next condition proposed is that in order to comply with Title 20, Section 2040-070B, the applicant shall restrict density to 1 resident per bedroom suite and shall provide a copy of the lease agreement with the density restriction, subject to review and approval by development services prior to building permit approval. Now, before I read the staff recommendation motion, I want to note that there is a discrepancy between the relevant Title 20 chapters in the staff report and these slides. The chapters on the slides that I will read in a second are the correct sections that state that staff recommends approval of the group living conditional use request located at 375 Scott Street in accordance with Missoula City zoning ordinance, Title 20, sections 2010-020D, 2040-070, 2085-070, and 2105-020B, based on the findings of fact in the staff report and subject to the conditions of approval. And that is the end of my presentation.
Great. Thanks, Caitlin. For the record, Heidi West is here and Heather Harp is here. I have 2 questions. I guess the first one's for you, Caitlin. Does the bike parking, does any of it meet the long-term bike parking standard, or is it all kind of our short-term bike parking requirements?
I think the applicant is in here and they don't meet the standards. They're covered, but they don't meet the standards unless they are under like security watch or video. And so I'd like to pike that to, I think Jerry is in here. Do you guys know?
Raise hand. Can you hear us?
Oh, Jules, yeah.
Go right ahead.
Hi, it's our intent to meet the standards of long-term bike parking. So they are covered. There is intended to be a fence surrounding it as well, so it can be secured at night.
Okay, great. I know there's been at adjacent multifamily uses, I know there's been some problems with bike theft that are a little elevated. So just wanted to make sure that was on your radar. And then my other question is, how will the parking be allocated? Will that be leased separately, or will it just be kind of available first come, first serve, or will it be, can you speak to that, I guess?
That's an operational issue that hasn't been ironed out completely yet. There's not a firm agreement in place. I think it may depend on what residents are there. You know, I think if there are residents that have special needs, they might get priority to get a reserved spot. But with barring that, they may end up being first come, first serve as well. So it's just a detail that hasn't been ironed out yet. Okay,
great. Who's your intended audience as far as if you have a kind of a tenant in mind, or I mean, who, you know, is there a demographic group or a type of tenant that you're targeting in particular? That's not a very, I guess that's just a question of curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense, and the owner does have had a specific person in mind. So it's kind of a co-housing arrangement, or what's called pod style living a lot of times, where it's kind of a central kitchen and then individual bedrooms, and there's the communal space where people hang out. So it's very similar to a dorm-like scenario. And kind of pursuant to that, there's an easy transition for someone to college to transition into a living unit like this. So the target audience is employees of the surrounding area. There's the hospital is down the road. There's retail and restaurants in the neighborhood as well. So that's the target audience, someone younger and a younger employee of the neighborhood.
Thanks. We have a couple questions. I have Heather Harp and then Julie Merritt.
Thanks, Jordan. This question might be for staff or it might be for you, Jules. In regards to trying to fit within Title 20 and having one person per bedroom suite, how do you defend that when someone might be in a relationship with somebody? If all of a sudden they want to live with their partner, do they have to move out? Is that one of the conditions of Title 20?
I mean, that's a really interesting point, and I to be honest, I wasn't aware that was part of the Title 20, and I think that is just part of the recommended
conditional approval. Caitlin, maybe you can
conditions of
speak to
approval.
that, correct?
It's not, the condition of approval is just to kind of protect that section of Title 20 and to make it come in the lease, but it's in Title 20, 2040-070B, which specifies that special density for group living. The chapter is called Use and Specific Building Standards for Group Living Uses. And it states the word residence instead of dwelling units. And so that's why, that's where that condition comes in.
I wonder if it wouldn't be something that is also operational, that indeed there are 46 residents permitted, but if the intake form, and Jerry's clearly going to be the person that has to answer how he would handle this, but if there was a couple that wanted to reside there, could they then leave one of the units vacant so that the capacity never exceeded 46? Does that make sense?
I think Mary has some other stuff to add for Title 20.
Okay.
Yeah, Mary, you want to chime in?
We can't hear you, Mary.
Sorry. Okay, so it is a odd section in Title 20 because these aren't dwelling units. They're not intended. They're intended to be bedroom suites, sort of like a large house or boarding house that has shared kitchen and living facilities. And Title 20 specifically states that the limits, the density limits, are to help address public facility and service demands and prevent overcrowding. So that's also why the parking requirements are so low, right? Because they see it more as a boarding house. They're not, it's treated more like a detached house. And then there is a definition of residence. So it says includes all people living at the site, including children, except that people who provide support services, building maintenance, care, and supervision are not considered residents. So, I'm not sure they were thinking of the pod living situation when group living typically applies to like community residential facilities and those sort of things. It's in that same section of Title 20. And perhaps, if it, I just don't think they were considering that this sort of pod living, but we're implementing the standards we have. It does have a density requirement. The condition could be revised to just have, I don't know how we verify the condition at building permit though. They can have up to 47, so they could have one unit that has 2 residents, but the remaining could only have 1, because the limit for the site is 47.
See, okay. All right, that's it for the moment.
Next, Julie, and then Heidi.
Hi, thanks. I think I have all kinds of questions, but I'll try and keep it brief. I appreciate that this is a type of housing that I think is something that we could really use in our community. So please don't take my questions as being necessarily in opposition to this idea. But I see that it looks like from the floor plans that the only accessibility to the 2nd and 3rd floors is planned as stairs, and that there's no elevator planned. So I'm concerned that we're definitely limiting the accessibility to the upper floors of this unit to people who are normally abled. And oh God, I actually had a question in there somewhere, but it has slipped my mind. I'm sorry, and it's not coming back. I'll raise my hand again if I remember it. Apologies.
Sure, that's fine, Julie. We can come back to you. Heidi?
So I was a few minutes late, so this might have been addressed already. But my first question is just that there's a kitchen on every floor. Is that correct?
No, there's a kitchen on the main floor
Just on the main
per
floor.
building. So there's 2 total, 1 per building.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is about, I know we've heard a lot about parking issues as well in this, particularly in this location. So I was wondering if there has been any thought to approaching Fresh Market right across the street and creating some sort of a parking agreement, because their parking lot is, especially on that western side, is underutilized.
I will. Thank you, Heidi. This is Marie with Intuitive. We have spoken with Jerry Dernberger, the owner, about that opportunity to have a shared parking arrangement or agreement with Fresh Market. I think that he would initially probably pursue the Montana Glass side, since they also, that's in the family. I think that that would cause less conflict. So there is availability there, but he was definitely not excited about having to restrict the project to have to rely on that. So as part of this, and Jules, maybe you can clarify, there is on-street parking that is not currently developed. It was part of a previous iteration of this project that will be developed on the north side of Montana Glass in this property. So there will be a couple more spaces on street. We can't count those, but they will be developed as part of this project as well.
Thank you. And then I just have one more thing, and this is more for staff. I think this is obviously not a thing we can really address in this context, but I think maybe we should flag the Title 20 wording about, like 1 person per residence, because I think we might want to check with, fair housing on the language, because I could see, only being able to rent to people in a certain relation, single people, as being a little bit of an issue. And I don't know how we would reconcile that, but I just want to flag it.
Can I
Mary?
follow up for a
Yeah,
moment?
Mary.
I agree. I don't believe this section was anticipating the dorm-like pod living. And so I think something that more clearly addresses this type of unit and product would be good to take a look at in Title 20, because each of these structures are considered like a single family house, just with a few more bedrooms, right? And in this case, quite a few more bedrooms. So I think I think it's a good product. I'm just not sure that our standards calling it resident, really fits with that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Julie?
I remembered, thank you. Two quick questions. One is, do you guys have an idea of the price point that you think these will rent for? And then the other is, do you anticipate having anyone living on site that would act as a manager of these situations? I can kind of anticipate that that might be something that would be useful in this scenario.
Yeah, Jerry, the owner, has definitely weighed the decision of having a manager on site. There is an office in case they are off site so that they can be there during the day. And I'm sorry, the first part of your question was?
Cost per.
Oh, cost per unit. You know, the entire goal of this is to make it, you know, sort of affordably priced or, cost effective for new renters. And so while there's not a specific price point out there, it's definitely aimed at well under the market to make it, accessible to all.
Thanks. Gwen?
Jordan, I was just going to point out that there was an email from Jim Nugent, and don't know if you were able to see that and had questions regarding that. I just wanted to draw your attention to that.
I did see it, and maybe I can just highlight that to get that in the record, with regard to the question about the maximum occupancy, Jim says, practically speaking, who will be performing the internal enforcement and how will they gain access to the inside of the building? I think just highlighting that this is sort of outside of our ability to, as the city, to monitor for guests, partners, spouses, etc. So I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that. Okay. All right, any additional questions? All right, Heather?
It's more of a comment if it's okay, Jordan.
It's okay, but remember this is pre-public hearing, so nothing substantive in support or opposition.
Absolutely, yep.
Okay.
No, I think this is an intriguing approach to what we see with housing, and especially the most expensive cost of housing tends to be kitchens and bathrooms. And so I'm curious to see how this project continues to develop.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sandra.
Thanks. There was an email from Mr. Nugent. I don't know if we should address that, asking, practically speaking, who will be performing the internal enforcement and how will they gain access to the inside of the building, and who will perform the nightly and morning daily bed checks, monitoring for guests, partners, and spouses, etc. I don't know if we should.
I don't think that that's the city's role. I mean, after the conditional use is granted, maybe, I don't know if the applicant wants to speak to that question at all, or Mary, I see you have your hand up. Do you want to address that?
I think that was the intent of the condition, is that they show that they can comply with the zoning density restriction by providing a copy of their lease agreement. And and then it's up to them to enforce their lease agreement. Our compliance system isn't one where we go and seek out issues, but if there was a problem of overcrowding where a neighborhood was complaining, it may come up, right, as a violation that we would have to work with the property owner to bring it into compliance.
And to follow up on that, at that point, that would become a code enforcement action through our code enforcement officer? Correct. Okay. Okay, great. I don't see any additional questions. So this is a pre-public hearing item, and I've lost my agenda in a mess of tabs in the browser. Can someone remind me when the public hearing for this will be?
Next Monday.
Okay, great. So we'll have this on our public hearing will begin next Monday, and then this will be scheduled for final action on the 28th. So without anything further, we can move on to our next agenda item, which is a conditional use request for a tavern and casino use at 2275 North Reserve Street. And Cassie Tripard has our staff report.
Yep, and can you all hear me and see my slides?
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm Cassie Chapard. I'm an associate planner at Development Services. We received a conditional use request from Jeff Mathis of JCM Architecture on behalf of Club Properties LLC for tavern and casino uses at 2275 North Reserve Street. The subject property is located near the intersection of North Reserve Street and Mullen Road. The subject property has frontage on one public right-of-way, which is North Reserve Street. Okay, the subject property is zoned C2-4 Community Commercial and is located in the Design Excellence Overlay Corridor Typology 4. They are proposing to use the existing building, which was previously used as a restaurant. It will be remodeled to accommodate tavern, casino, and restaurant uses. Design Excellence Review occurred prior to conditional use review. The project was approved for compliance with Design Excellence standards, and we will view renderings of elevations later in the presentation. Adjacent properties to the north, west, and south share the same zoning designation. To the north, there is retail. The parcel abutting the subject property to the south and west contains fuel sales, retail, and casino uses. Parcels to the east are zoned M1R-2, limited industrial residential, and contain fuel sales, retail, and restaurant uses. The applicable regional plan is our Missoula City Growth Policy 2035, which recommends a land use designation of regional commercial and services for 2275 North Reserve Street. Areas designated as regional commercial and services are for commercial uses that serve the needs of the broader region and often require large areas. All abutting parcels share the same land use designation. Here are some photos of the existing main entry. The applicant is proposing to update the facade and to expand the plaza area near the main entry. On the left, you can see the existing facade facing North Reserve Street. You can see that currently there is a lack of landscaping along the facade and in the landscape island. The Title 20 landscaping chapter was not triggered by the proposed development. The applicant will be voluntarily landscaping the site and existing parking lot islands. The second photo shows an existing entrance to the rear of the building. The applicant is proposing to create a vestibule around the entrance to serve the casino portion of the development. And here are some more examples of areas where landscaping will be voluntarily improved. A new pedestrian route from the public sidewalk to the main entry will be added along the landscape island shown in the photo on the left. Here's the proposed site plan. Site improvements include landscaping, an expanded plaza area, bike racks, benches, and a pedestrian path to the main entry. The building footprint will not be changing aside from the vestibule area at the rear entry, and they'll be using the existing parking lot. 55 parking spaces are required and 58 are provided. Although a few parking spaces are being removed to accommodate the larger plaza, there's still enough parking to accommodate the new uses. There's not an increase in required parking from the previous restaurant use. And here's the proposed floor plan. The casino will be located in a separate room within the existing building and will have a separate entrance from the restaurant and bar. These renderings show what the main entry will look like once the facade has been updated. The updated facade was approved for design excellence and complies with design excellence requirements such as glazing, street-facing entry, and siding materials. And here's some additional renderings. In the picture on the lower right, you can see the proposed vestibule for the casino entry. Title 20, Section 2080-70 or 2085-70H outlines the review criteria City Council must consider for conditional uses. The first is whether the proposed use complies with all applicable standards of the Title 20 zoning ordinance. Both tavern and casino uses are permitted as conditional uses in the C2-4 Community Commercial Zoning District, and restaurants are permitted as of right. The project has been approved for compliance with design excellence, and compliance with all applicable sections of the Title 20 zoning ordinance will be confirmed prior to building permit approval if City Council imposes condition of approval number 1. The second review criteria is whether the proposed use is in the interest of public convenience and will not have a significant adverse impact on the general welfare of the neighborhood or community. Adverse impacts on the general welfare of the neighborhood or community are not anticipated. The tavern and casino uses in this location are in the interest of public convenience by providing more services adjacent to a major arterial street. The tavern and casino are located in a commercial business area that includes similar uses. There are no abutting residential uses. Motorized and non-motorized transportation options are available to serve the property. And the new proposed pedestrian path will make accessing the building safer and more convenient for pedestrians. The property is in an area that is already served by city police and city fire. City council must consider whether the proposed use is compatible with the character of the surrounding area in terms of site planning, building scale, and project design. The existing building and parking lot will remain. The facade improvements were approved for design excellence and will be compatible with the character of the surrounding area in terms of building scale and project design. The site will be improved by a new pedestrian route from the public sidewalk to the main entry, an expanded plaza area, and revitalized landscaping. The fourth criteria to consider is whether the proposed use has operating characteristics that are compatible with the surrounding area in terms of hours of operation, outdoor lighting, noise, and traffic generation. The hours of operation for the tavern and casino uses are 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. There are gas stations in 2 other casinos near the intersection of Mullen and North Reserve Street, which stay open late. No new site lighting was proposed at the time of design excellence review. The existing parking lot lighting will remain. The project will not increase the amount of outdoor lighting. And if new site or building lighting is installed, it must be reviewed by Development Services as a condition of design excellence approval. It must meet the Missoula outdoor lighting ordinance. Noise generated by the use will be required to conform with the regulations for a commercial zone as established in the Missoula Municipal Code, Chapter 93040. The parking requirement for the project will not increase from the previous restaurant use, meaning the project will not generate additional traffic. And then City Council must determine that the proposed use will not have a significant adverse impact on traffic safety or comfort, including all modes of transportation. Again, the parking requirement for the project will not increase from the previous use, so the project will not generate additional traffic. North Reserve Street, adjacent to the subject property, has existing pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular infrastructure. A new pedestrian route from the public sidewalk to the entry will be installed to increase safety, and this route will be ADA accessible. Short-term and long-term bike racks will be installed in compliance with Title 20. And staff recommends one condition of approval. The tavern and casino conditional uses at 2275 North Reserve Street shall comply with all applicable portions of Title 20 and design excellence review approval. Plans submitted at the time of building permit application shall substantially conform with the plans submitted at the time of conditional use review, subject to review and approval of Development Services prior to building permit approval. And staff recommends approval of the tavern and casino conditional use request located at 2275 North Reserve Street in accordance with Missoula City zoning ordinance based on the findings of fact in the staff report and subject to the conditions of approval. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Any questions, or would the applicant like to add anything? Oh, I think yeah, you're muted. There you go. Yeah.
Isaac Maphis, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I really don't have anything to add. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have about the project. I think Cassie explains. I'll just leave it at that and be glad to participate however you requested.
Great, thanks. Does anyone have any questions for staff or the applicant? Okay. You might get off the hook without too many questions here.
Kind of rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff, I'm going to mute you if that's okay. I think there's a little feedback coming from your end.
Yeah, issue.
Okay. I apologize. I did not ask for public comment on the previous item. There is someone in attendance. So I would take public comment on either this item or the previous item. And if you wish to give comment, if you're calling by phone, just press *9 on your phone, and that will indicate to me that you want to provide comment. Okay, we'll just wait for a second. In the meantime, are there any additional questions? All right. So we'll also see this item for a public hearing next week. And if there's nothing further, we can be adjourned. All right, thanks everyone. Have a good day.